Is this year championship or bust for Matt Painter and the Boilermakers?
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Boilermakers here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We got a very special guest coming your way today, guys. We got the co-host of Brags in the Stands, Purdue basketball. To a fault, we've got Kraig Bowers on the show. Kraig, how are you doing today? And thank you for coming on the show.
I'm doing good, man. Doing good. Just for reference, the Purdue basketball show is Boilers in the Stands. Braggs also does Chicago Bears stuff and whatnot, and he's got some other co-hosts there because I don't know anything about Chicago Bears football. So
fair enough. All right, yeah. Man. Well, thank you for joining the show. I appreciate you coming on. So we got a big episode coming your way today. We got a lot to talk about, for Purdue basketball. We're in August, right around football season, but there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Matt Painter, when it comes to this year for Purdue. And one of those things that I want to go ahead and talk about are the expectations for 2025. Me and you, we had a little bit of a conversation on X or Twitter about this. I got a little bit of heat for a take that I had saying that Matt Painter needs to win a championship this year. And while to a certain extent, I do believe that this team has the ability to make it there. There are some different takes about what is a successful season for Purdue this year. So I wanted to go ahead and ask you, Kraig, what do you think is a successful season for Purdue basketball? Where do you think they can go this year?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt expectations are a Final Four with this team. If anything but a Final Four is going to feel like this team maybe didn't reach their potential. But with that said, right, the NCAA tournament is the biggest crapshoot of any postseason in any sport anywhere that is played because it's single elimination, 6 games in a row, and you just never know what can happen there. It's not a 7-game series, so anything can pop up and happen. I don't think there's any doubt that the expectation is a national championship. I don't know that from my standpoint, if Painter doesn't win it this year, I don't think it's that long before we're back there again in terms of having a team that is favored earlier in the season to make a Final Four run. He's shown it in a couple different iterations now that they can get there. He can get those type of players. And I know we're going to talk recruiting later, but if you just look at the type of players that he's drawing interest from now, historically, that necessarily hasn't been the case. So I've just got a lot of faith in the fact that Purdue's got staying power with what they're doing right now.
Absolutely. And we've seen Matt Painter as a talent developer. We've seen that he's consistently been able to turn guys into stars, whether that's a Zach Edey who comes in and then turns him into a national player of the year. We see that now with Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer. He's the best guard developer in the nation, and he has consistently great backcourts for a reason. So going into this year for Matt Painter, obviously you say, it's not that we're going to be right back in this position, even if a national championship isn't won this year. And while I do agree with that, what do you think that a championship would mean for Matt Painter's legacy this year?
It would mean everything. And, there's always that whatever at the end of a statement that hasn't won a national championship. Before it hadn't been to a Final Four. And you see that follow coaches around that have a lot of success and just haven't had the chance to get it done, or haven't, for whatever reason, had that moment yet. So, I think it would cement his legacy, just in terms of not only what he means to Purdue, but just in the landscape of college basketball in general. As we look at it historically, it puts that stamp on it, right? I think he's a Hall of Famer anyway, but it would put a stamp on that without a doubt. And, if being there for when Purdue finally punched their ticket to the Final Four, you saw the emotion. Well, one, you saw the family atmosphere of Purdue basketball because so many former Purdue players came to the Final Four, but there were a lot there that day to be there if that moment happened when he finally punched his ticket. And you saw the emotion in like Robbie Hummel when he's interviewing Painter after the game. So it would not only mean a bunch to Painter, to Purdue fans, to this team, obviously, but it would mean a lot to that legacy of players that has come through, not even with Matt Painter, because we got to remember Purdue's only had 2 coaches in the last, I don't know the exact number of years, but between Painter and Katie, it's been decades upon decades. So that lineage and that family of players, it's going to mean something to the entire program for anybody who's been involved with it in any way.
Yeah, so Purdue basketball, it is a family like you talk about. It's a long lineage of guys who play this game in a landscape of college sports right now where honestly, there really isn't a whole lot of loyalty when it comes to certain guys jumping around in the portal, NIL, running rampant throughout college sports right now.
Yeah.
What does it mean to have those 3 guys, a Braden Smith, a Fletcher Lawyer, and a TKR, who have stayed here, stayed consistent, stayed under Matt Painter's wing, and really developed in this system and kind of been Purdue to a fault over the years?
Yeah, and you see a lot of different stats out this year already about just the percentage of scoring that returns on this team compared to other teams across the country. And there's only like 1 or 2 other high major programs that are even close. So that continuity, I think, something that gets lost a lot of times in the offseason. Everybody wants to talk about who's getting recruited in as a transfer, what type of NIL money they're getting, all that sort of stuff. You hardly ever hear anybody talk about how good of a job a coach is doing retaining players. And I think that's where Painter's really made his mark, that he's been able to go out and grab a key transfer here or there. Like, he'll go get guys. Obviously, Lance Jones was an integral piece to making that national championship run. He goes out and gets arguably the best center in the portal this year. So he'll go out and grab those guys. But his ability to retain guys that are true high-level contributors to this team isn't talked about enough, because even with some other really high quality programs that were super competitive last year, you still saw you still saw some of those guys take off and leave for a bigger payday in this offseason.
So we talk about Braden Smith, we talk about Fletcher Lawyer, and we talk about TKR early on. Obviously, we're in August, so just speculation here, but Braden Smith is the front runner to win the National Player of the Year award, and for good reason. He's been, like I said, loyal to a fault, and he's on pace to break the all-time leading assist record if he can average about 8 assists, stay healthy throughout the year, and Purdue makes a deep-ish run in March. There's real opportunity for Braden Smith to win that award. However, I brought up the point that when we look at what the voters like, they tend to side with high quality bigs. Since 2018, only 1 guard has won it, and that was in 2018. That was Jalen Brunson at Villanova. Who do you think would have the edge? Obviously, a hypothetical situation. Braden Smith, TKR. You obviously want to see one of those guys win that award this year. Who do you think would be the front runner to win that award?
I think that record means so much, and it has been around so long. And just the family that wins it, where that team's from, Duke. I mean, having played at Duke during that time, I think Braden chasing that record will change that dynamic some. I think it's such a massive record if he does break it, if he does accomplish that there's going to be such a spotlight on him, that it's going to be hard, man. Like, if Purdue's really good and looks like they're going to make a Final Four type run, and Braden Smith is just games away from breaking that national record, I have a really hard time seeing voters not casting their ballot for Braden Smith.
For sure.
But, when you look at the betting odds, TKR is on that list, like in the top 5, top 10, whatever it is that they're showing, he's still on that list as well. And I have no doubt in my mind, I think he got robbed last year of All-American status, and there's no doubt in my mind that he will be on All-American this year. But unless TK just goes out, because the fact that he's not like a major rim protector defender is a big, I think, hurts him a little bit. I think that hurt him in the All-American view last year. And, unless he just pops off and is averaging 25, 26 plus a game, I still think Braden most likely has the better chance of getting it done.
All right. And then we're going to hit on a guy that's coming in that's going to give TKR a little bit more opportunity to be a scoring big this year. We'll talk about him in our next segment, but just kind of previewing that, Matt Painter brings in a center in those portal. He also gets Daniel Jacobson back healthy this year. How important do you think it is going to be to produce success this year that not only do they have TKR, but they also have a couple great bigs that are going to be able to kind of clog up that paint and provide TKR the luxury to really score at will this year.
It's just massive because of two reasons. One, I don't know, I guess, your thoughts on what the quote deficiency around this Purdue basketball team was last year that didn't let them excel maybe to the level that they had the year before or even the year before that. But when we're looking at this group last year, to me, the number one deficiency was rebound, just without a doubt. When you look at Matt Painter Purdue basketball teams over the years, they tend to have sizable rebounding advantages in every game. I mean, you can just mark it down that they're going to win the rebounding battle. And last year that just didn't happen. And it was a struggle. So for me, that's number one. So he goes out in the portal and grabs arguably the best rebounder in the entire country last year. And I wanted to get eyes on him, see it. I'm a guy who likes to see things in person. And man, he is physical in person. Watching him in practice, he has a really good read on the ball. He reacts to it quickly. He believes that every ball that goes up and hits the rim or the glass should be his in that possession. So I think that is major. And then for me, the secondary deficiency on that team last year was lack of rim protection. That's what hurt them defensively. This isn't a team that is just stacked with extremely good perimeter defenders. They're good perimeter defenders on this team, but I wouldn't say any that you would like list as super high level relative to the Big Ten or other top teams around the country. So you need that backstop, right? We always had Zach Edey as that backstop to erase it when a guy would get beat out on the perimeter. And now you've got that. And that's Jacobson, right? So you got rebounding with one, you got that elite rim protector on the other side. Cluff, I don't think, is necessarily a guy that's going to record a huge amount of block numbers, but he's really physical and he can just impede progress, make shots harder, even if he's not going to rack up, 2 blocks a game like we might see Daniel do. So, last year, if those two things are fixed, I think this team very easily could have gone back to a national championship game. So, for me, that's why people are so high on this team this year.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about a guy in Cluff. We'll talk about another recruit who is an international recruit coming in, and we'll have that here for you next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind. Whether you got your eye on the big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in the game. Who do you think is going to win the MVP this year? Maybe Saquon Barkley as a running back, maybe a Joe Burrow, Pat Mahomes, Jalen Hurts can get his Eagles back to the Super Bowl. Well, with PrizePicks, you can pick 2 to 6 player stats. If you get your picks right, you can cash and win up to 2,000 times your money. The flex play option is a total game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you still double your money. So you can do all of that if you download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On College to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you by DripDrop. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts. And that's where DripDrop comes in. DripDrop is a doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. I personally have been using that grape flavor. That's my go-to. I really enjoyed it. And you guys can get your hands on that great DripDrop as well. Because right now, DripDrop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. So just head on over to DripDrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's DripDrop.com with promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. In our last segment, we talked about a center who's going to provide some stability in the front court, and that guy is Oscar Cluff. But Oscar Cluff isn't the only guy that Purdue's bringing in this year that is an international prospect, as Omer Mayer is coming in, showed out for the U19 World Cup this past summer for Israel. What does a guy like Mayer mean for this team, and what is he going to be able to provide, Kraig?
I think he's going to be really, really important to this team's success. And as we look at Meyer in terms of what he accomplished, in the U19, well, I guess he played in two, right? He played U19 and U20 in the Europe Cup. Um, there's just things that he can do that I think this team was missing in terms of a secondary creator on offense. I have no delusion that when Braden is on the court that he's not going to be the primary ball handler and primary creator. He still is going to be. But when Braden's on the bench, Meyer is a guy that comes off that now you have that second creator that can be on the floor. And on top of that, he can go get his own shot. His percentages are higher when he's catch and shoot, or when he's not just pulling up and shooting a three off the dribble, but he can still do it. And we saw him do it multiple times, and in both of those sessions that we got to see this summer. So I think just that, Lance was kind of our de facto late shot clock. Give it to him and let him, create some wild shot that he might pull off. And we were missing that a little bit last year. So I think that Meyer brings that to the table. And he's got really good vision. So you've got a second guy that can create. You got a second guy you can run out of, high ball screen, pick and roll action with a big. He's going to take some weight off of Braden's shoulders, even if I've seen some predictions that Braden's going to be able to play 33 minutes a game or something like that. Dude's still going to play 35 plus. I guarantee it. Right. But even when he's on the court, if there's some times where Meyer can be that creator, that primary ball handler, just for a play or two here or there, that gives Braden that little bit of a break where it's not constantly in his hands, that's going to save him.
So whenever Meyer comes in, there has been some speculation because when you look at kind of the projected starting lineup for this team, obviously Fletcher is going to have a spot. Obviously, Braden Smith, TKR, they're all going to fit in. And that leaves a spot open at the 2 or at the 3. I personally have been an advocate for either a CJ Cox or a Ja'Cory Harris. I think those two guys are ready for the moment now. I think that they've kind of been battle tested to the point where you can put them in to that lineup and get solid production from them. There have been people that have kind of stepped up for Meyer to fit into that lineup. Are you one of those people? Do you think that the offense that he brings to that lineup kind of overpowers what may be lacking in on the defensive side of the ball, just because there are very lengthy wings at the Big Ten that he'd have to match up against?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch how that plays out. And I haven't been able to get eyes on him yet, right? I obviously watched him in those games on TV. Some of those teams they were playing weren't maybe the most talented, most athletic teams. So that's one thing I want to see. And he was here for the second practice that we got to go to, but they decided to rest him just after all the play that he had been through. But I want to see, what's he look like as a defender trying to guard even some of Purdue's guards just in practice. So see how he's going to hold up. Everybody that you'll talk to about coming into Purdue, and Rafael Davis, who, was an all Big Ten defender, will tell you the hardest thing to do when you get to Purdue is to pick up the defense because of the way, just the design of how they do it, where you're supposed to cover, switches, everything else, depending on who you're with in that pairing at the time, where your next rotation is. All of that stuff takes some time to pick up. Rafael became a great defender in the end, but he didn't come in that way. So I think a lot of will he start, will he not start is going to be A, how quick he picks up the defensive assignments and rotations, and B, how proficient of a defender he can show that he is. If he comes in and he's, a positive defender on the perimeter, then sure, I think there's a chance he could start. I think it's more likely, especially he got here, he practiced a day and a half with the team. And then the rest of the team had hit their 8-week allotment of summer practice. So he's only been doing individual workouts since then. So now we're going to go back to practice, in September here and just have 7-8 weeks before they play their first exhibition game. So I think it's more likely, at least at the beginning of the year, that we see Jakari or we see CJ out there starting because they're positive defenders, plus defenders out there on the perimeter. And also just because that timeline's so short for him to pick everything up and to have it where he's not having to think about it and it's just acting instinctively.
So we talked Meyer, and then we brought him up a little bit in our previous segment, but I do want to touch a little bit more on a guy. We bring him in through the portal, South Dakota State University. You talked about how great he's going to be as a rebounder this year. Oscar Cluff. Just kind of break down for my audience what Oscar Cluff means, what he's going to be for this team, and how much better Purdue will be with Oscar Cluff on the floor.
I mean, the first thing that strikes you when you put eyes on him is just that dude's a wide body. Like he is a big boy. And just not like built in terms of being like overly like ripped up muscled, but he's just like a sturdy body and he's not going to get pushed around. He's going to fit right in the Big Ten, banging against other bigs down low in there. And that's going to allow him to carve out space. It's going to make things more difficult for other bigs to score and obviously to help him rebound. He's got really good hands. He catches difficult passes in traffic extremely well. Just watching some tape on him, even in transition, he did a really nice job of catching and transitioning to that layup, or a short shot. I think his footwork's really good as well. He can finish over either side. He's not going to play above the rim a bunch. I know one of the videos I put out were of a couple of dunks that he did, but even at South Dakota State, you didn't necessarily see him playing above the rim a ton. But he's got good footwork. He's got soft hands. He's got a soft touch on that shot. And he's just going to clean everything up, I think, on the glass as far as that goes. I think another thing that's really, really important with him, that's going to be really important, is he's a really good screener. And as much as we're running, high ball screen, pick and roll action and whatnot, if they go to that with him, he's a guy that can set really hard, really physical screens. And like I said, he's a wide body. He's hard to get around. And then he's a plus passer. I don't know exactly how they'll use him. It'll be interesting to see how they do. But, when TK and Zach were playing together, there was some high to low, big to big stuff. I'd be shocked if that wasn't in the playbook a little bit this year, especially because Cluff has shown he has the ability, even though it's on really low volume, he does have ability to shoot that three ball. And his percentage is ridiculous high, but it's only on, 7 attempts in his entire career. But even in practice the other day, he was drilling them. I don't think they want him out there. They want him down low rebounding. If he's out shooting threes, he can't be cleaning up the glass. But, if they do some of that big to big, high to low action, if they don't guard him, I have no doubt that he'll just go ahead and rip it and pull it.
So we talked two guys that are going to come in this year, but we also got two guys that may fill up the 2026 class. We'll have some more on that 2026 class coming up here for you next. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need OpenPhone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle two phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? Well, OpenPhone has solved that instantly. See why over 60,000 businesses trust OpenPhone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months on openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's OPENPHONE.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. That's OpenPhone. No missed calls, no missed customers. Our last segment, we talked about two guys that are going to plug in this year for Purdue. This next segment, I want to talk about two guys that may fit into the future. And I'm going to go ahead, get started right away in Southern Indiana, Mount Vernon High School, Luke Ertl. Kraig, tell me about Luke Ertl, the left-handed guard. We get a commitment from the #1 player out of the state of Indiana in 2026. Matt Painter is able to get an early commitment from Ertl and kind of secure him in that class for 2026. What do you think that Luke Ertl is going to mean for this program going forward after Braden Smith moves on?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be able to do a little bit of everything as a guard. And, he initially was listed as a combo guard. After this summer, people were talking more, and I think early on, people were really thinking more of a shooting guard. But after what he's shown this summer, it sure looks like that he's a guy that could come in and run the point. Now, next year, the assumption is Meyer's going to slide into that role that Braden Smith's running. But then we're back in this situation again now where we have two guys that can be high quality facilitators, two guys that can go out and get their shot that you've got in that rotation. And obviously you would have CJ and Jakari coming back for year 3, hopefully as well. So I think just in terms of what he's shown and in terms of his shot making, his extreme confidence, his ability to facilitate for others, and a high energy guy, right? It's what you love to see as a Purdue fan, somebody that goes out and plays with a lot of energy, really, really high IQ. I think he sees the floor extremely well. I think he makes smart decisions when he's out there. Obviously, a whole lot of other people saw this too, right? The ascension, because he shot up all the way to whatever 53 on some of the metrics, and I think he's even higher than that on some others. There's a really good chance that he comes in as the highest ranked guard that Matt Painter's ever recruited. And I think that speaks a lot just in general, right? The landscape of this has changed because, I mean, NIL has changed things. The transfer portal has changed things. So you have some other big programs that are more reliant on the portal, whereas Painter seems to still want to build his core from high school recruiting and then kind of fill around that. So I think that's part of it that Purdue's in the mix for some of these higher recruits, because some of the other programs have shied away from high school recruiting to some degree. But I also think this times out just with the ascension of Purdue. And I think it starts with Carson Edwards, what he did in that NCAA tournament run. You talk to a lot of these guards and they talk about watching Carson in that run as their like first kind of connection to Purdue of really thinking about Purdue super positively. And then, that spills over to Jaden Ivey, who's a lottery pick. And then that spills over to Braden Smith, who's a National Player of the Year front runner. So I think especially with guards, we could always recruit bigs, but with guards, I think Purdue's name just means something different than it did 10 years ago.
All right, so you bring up the name Carson Edwards. I didn't necessarily plan on touching this guy in this segment, but Antoine West Jr. has gotten Carson Edwards comparisons from Matt Painter. He's not in the 2026 class, but comes in this year. Probably won't see a whole ton of minutes because just how stacked this team is. What do you think about that guy? What do you think his future looks like in West Lafayette?
Well, I'll tell you, if he gets minutes this year, I think it's because he has a chance to be an elite defender. He's got incredible wingspan. He's athletic. He's got good size relative to some of the other guards that are on this team right now. So I think he has a chance to be a really, really high level defender, which is something that Carson was a good enough defender, right? But that was never Carson's calling card. So that's an area where I think West could excel for this team, even this year, if he gets a chance to run. But long term, I think he's going to be just a lockdown defender. And I mean, Painter's reference to Carson, I think primarily was the fact that when West starts to feel it, he can heat up and just go into this zone where he's going to knock down any shot, whatever shot from whatever over and over and over again. Like Carson could space out into that zone like we saw in the NCAA tournament when he set the 3-point record. So I think he's going to be really good, man. And it's hard because you look at this team, the roster up and down, and you're like, where are they going to get minutes? Where is Jack Benner going to get minutes? Because they are really high on Jack Benner, and they're trying to carve out minutes for him at the 4 spot. And you look at West, and you go, well, how in the heck's he going to crack the lineup? And you see him harassing Braden in practice, and you're like, man, I don't know. Like, this guy's defense might get him on the floor at some point this year. So I don't know. I don't expect to see a ton of minutes for him this year, but I think he's going to be really, really good as soon as he gets his chance to get on the court.
And then finishing it up with a guy, 6'10", really has been turning some heads this summer, has moved all the way up into the top 30 of that 2026 class when you look at those recruits. And that's the guy by the name of Quinn Costello, coming out of the Boston area. Puts his final 6 down about 2 weeks ago, I believe. And that's Minnesota, North Carolina, Michigan State, Purdue, and I'm forgetting one. But Purdue was included in that top
Texas.
6. Texas, there we go. And anyway, so that official visit happens this weekend. What do you think about a guy like Quinn Costello? What do you think about Matt Painter trying to secure another big who can shoot the three ball? 6'10", like I said, can shoot the three ball, can stretch the floor. What do you think about Quinn Costello? And do you think that Painter might be able to get that commitment?
Yeah, today was really the first time I'd watched much film on him. It seems like stuff changes so fast, and reading some of the stuff on Purdue recruiting throughout the summer, it seems that way, right? Like you think you can be a lock for a guy, and then boom, somebody comes in with a bigger offer, or somebody comes on the radar that you didn't think you had a chance at. So I hadn't watched a ton of film necessarily on some of these guys, but I watched some on him today, and the first thing I just noticed, and with any of these bigs, one of the first things I'm looking at is just how do they move, even without the ball. I'm just watching them run up and down the court. I'm watching them trying to move laterally because it's 6'10" to 7'4", whatever. If you can do those things, if you can get up and down the floor and you can move laterally and you have good footwork, a lot of times the other stuff will come once, Purdue gets a hold of them and starts to develop them. And I just thought that jumped out right away. Really good in terms of the way that he moves, really athletic for his size, but then he's also got a heck of an outside shot. So I I went through all these guys today because Joe and I don't usually talk recruiting. So I put in about 3 hours of film watch for this for you. And
Appreciate it.
not he was one of the ones I start right away. Was like, man, I would love to land this guy in West Lafayette.
Great, Kraig. Thank you once again for coming on the show. That's all we got. I'm sure we'll be talking more Boilers basketball all the way up until the season. Thank you so much, Kraig. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, it was fun. Certainly love to see everybody that's getting in and covering Purdue sports in general, and especially Purdue basketball. So glad to have you here. I assume you're going to be at some games in West Lafayette,
Oh,
and
for sure.
we'll connect at some point down the road.
All right, great. Thank you so much.